Welcome to New Thinking for a New World, a Tallberg Foundation podcast. I am Alan Stoga, your host. Each week, I bring you conversations with people who think differently about the great issues that are shaping our world. Geopolitics, disruptive tech, mass migration, the changing climate, culture wars, all of it is grist for our mill. I hope you enjoy listening. I also hope you will let me know what you think and that you join the conversation at tallbergfoundation.org. And now for today's episode of New Thinking for a New World. In recent years, Palestinians felt abandoned as the Arabs and the Israelis forged new economic-based relationships encouraged by the United States. The plight and problems of millions of Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank became almost invisible to almost all except themselves. The attacks on October 7th and the ongoing brutal Israeli response changed that, perhaps forever. Indeed, it's hard to imagine how ordinary Palestinians will ever recover, not just from the direct casualties of the war, but from the erasure of even the most ordinary rudiments of secure, predictable lives. All wars end, and this one will as well. But the people who survive, especially the almost 50% of Gazans under the age of 18, will surely be marked for life. So what? I know that sounds harsh, but it's a question that demands answers. Could the tragedy of war somehow lead to better lives for millions of Palestinians? Could Palestine become a state sharing in the prosperity envisioned by the Abraham Accords? Or are Palestinians condemned to remain stuck in whatever circle of Dante's hell they now inhabit? No one knows the answers, but my guest today brings a sort of experience and insight that at least could give us a window on possibilities. Francesca Borri is an Italian journalist who lives part of the time since 2007 in the West Bank and who is respected by Arabs as well as Israelis. Proof point, she was the first Western journalist to interview Yasser Arafat in 2018. Welcome, Francesca, to New Thinking for a New World.
Ciao.
Let's start with Sinwar. I read your interview with him, published in La Repubblica, but also the op-ed that you published in a Norwegian paper after his death, sort of bookends. Both were extraordinary journalism. One of the things that struck me in your 2018 conversation with him was his offer. He talked about an unconditional ceasefire, nothing for nothing, and see what happens. Was he serious?
I think so. As you can imagine, after October 7th, I've been asked, this question over and over again first of all, by Israelis, because that interview was run front page by Yediot Ahronot, which is Israel's largest, newspaper, October 2018, 6th of October. It sounds like a lifetime ago. The point is, that interview, as most of my work actually, it wasn't like, 20 minutes together, half an hour together, 1 hour together with Yahya Sinwar. No. I spent months in Gaza in 2018 because 2018 was the year of the March of Return. The March of Return was actually an initiative of Palestinians, not Hamas, not Fatah. Palestinians were really fed up with everything, including Hamas and Fatah. They were, living under, the borders have been closed since 2006, basically, no? And they started walking, toward the barrier, the fence, toward Israel, basically, peacefully. With the idea, to escape, and for months, and then Hamas basically somehow, started organizing these weekly demonstrations. But again, at the beginning was, a Palestinian initiative, and so Hamas tried everything, tried violence and non-violence. Even peaceful demonstrations, So at the end of 2018, with most Palestinians against him and no way to, let's say, unblock, the situation, Yahya Sinwar decided a new option, engaging Israel and addressing Israel. And yes, I mean, getting a deal. And that's why I am 99% sure, of course I can be wrong, that, he was not lying. He was not trying to, to mislead Israel. No, because after that interview, the title was I Don't Want War Anymore. After that interview also, for several months, there was a direct channel between Yahya Sinwar and Israel and Netanyahu, who was already prime minister. And I know, because I was not involved, but of course, I remember very well, there were these meetings, there were these exchange of messages. And the point is, Hamas was very weak and Israel was very strong at the time, because we didn't know. But Netanyahu was, negotiating much more than that. He was not only negotiating with Hamas, he was negotiating, with bin Zayed for the Abraham Accords, And then in 2020, we were under lockdown, there was COVID, and Palestinians were totally forgotten. And in the meantime, in 2021, we had another war in Gaza. And then in 2021, when, suddenly we basically read, in newspapers about this agreement between Israel and the Emirates, I went to meet Khaled Meshal, who is, one of the founders of Hamas, and by far, still today, the most charismatic member of the Politburo, the former head of Hamas. And I met him for another interview, and that interview was the opposite of, my interview with Yahya Sinwar. So after the Abraham Accords, Hamas changed. That's why I say, yes, that was really a missed opportunity in 2018.
So what led Hamas, Sinwar in particular, to October 7th? That complete failure of 5 years earlier, the effort?
Yes, I think honestly, we will never know for sure, but I think, Hamas was in a corner until October 6th. I was, in Jenin for most of this so-called third intifada, which means 2022. So on October 7th, 2023 had already been the bloodiest year, in terms of death toll for Palestinians since the end of the second intifada. Palestine, both Gaza and the West Bank were boiling. Were boiling then, and the settlers were, attacking everything and everyone, and Palestinians were totally forgotten. Totally. After that interview with Yahya Sinwar in 2018, we had COVID, then we had Ukraine. I know very well, because I arrived in Ramallah for the first time in 2007. I was still a university student. And then, with the Arab Spring, I was in Syria, in Iraq. I'm a war reporter, no? But every 2-3 months, I always came back to Ramallah, which was somehow my home. And also because I write for Israel's main newspaper. And all other journalists, were wondering why, I was going back to such an irrelevant place, and this until October 6th. And absolutely, in Jenin, there were just, we were just 3 journalists. And there was also Gideon Levy for Haaretz, and there was Mariam Barghouti for Al Jazeera. So no Western media, no international media, but we knew what was happening, So the point is, Hamas was in a corner, totally in a corner. And until October 6th, Palestinians in Gaza were absolutely against Hamas. And yes, and Palestinians were forgotten, and this is, I'm speaking, because I spoke with Hamas leaders. What they planned on October 7th was a little bit different, which doesn't justify, of course, Yahya Sinwar, because basically the idea, as far as I understand, as we understand, was a smaller attack, as fewer hostages, to try to get in exchange the end of the siege of Gaza, and to try to take power, in the West Bank. So it was a different operation, a different scale, and another mistake of Yahya Sinwar. Yahya Sinwar was absolutely, sure about an Arab, intervention. And this is totally, in line with Yahya Sinwar as I knew him. Because if there is, he was very, he listened to everybody before deciding, but once he decided something, he could crush everything and everyone in front of him, but he would go, straight. And this happened also, with my interview in 2018, when he had a minority against that interview, against the idea of opening, a direct channel with Israel. And when I asked him, but, how much of Hamas is behind you in this decision to speak directly with Israel? And he said, well, I have against, about 30-40% of Hamas in Gaza, which is a lot already, no? He didn't care. He decided, to speak with Israel. He did it. And in the same way, on October 7, he decided, to attack. And basically, he said little, to even to the other leaders of Hamas, to Fatah, to the other Palestinians, to Palestinians actually. He didn't really say anyone about, his plan. Then the plan probably went, beyond what was planned.
So consequence. I saw a piece by Hassan Jabber who argued, you may have seen this, that now Sinwar will be seen as a symbol of revolution and resistance for years to come. I don't know what that means in practice. What do you think his legacy is? And does it matter?
I think it is too early. Because, there is a missing tile in all our, analysis and Palestinians in Gaza. Palestinians in Gaza, are bearing the brunt of, Yahya Sinwar's decisions more than anyone else, And if I know Gaza a little bit, Palestinians in Gaza, when finally they will speak again, they will be furious with Hamas, with Israel, with the international community, with the West Bank, with the Palestinian Authority, with all of us, with all of us. So I think, that to assess the legacy of Yahya Sinwar, we have to wait for what Palestinians in Gaza will have to say. But it's also somehow, you were talking about, this last image, the last moments of his life when, he's throwing this stick, at the drone, which is chasing him. And, yes, if you are in the Arab world now, it's kind of a legend. But that image is also, its opposite, because you can read that image as, yes, an image of defiance, an image of resistance until, your last moments, or exactly the opposite, the idea, that, because Sinwar took, there is another picture of Sinwar quite famous, taken after October 7th. At some point, he resurfaced from the tunnels. And there is this picture, he's sitting on a chair, an armchair in the rubble, smiling like, I'm the king. Well, yes, the king of the ruins, the king of the rubble, the king of the devastation, And what's left? A stick against the drones. You just, you just threw back with that stick, you threw back Gaza to the Middle Age, to the Stone Age. I know that probably, when you say this, Palestinians and Arabs immediately say, oh, Israel threw back Gaza to the Stone Age, not Hamas. Let's wait a little bit, And I think also that the legacy, which one of the two images will prevail in the end for the kids of Gaza now, It's also up to us,
Let's talk about the Stone Age, because that's a good metaphor. Place has been destroyed. Lives are turned upside down, inside out. Kids haven't been in school for however long it's been so far. There's malnutrition, there's food problems, there's all of the horrors of war in this tiny little space. It's sort of Alistair Horn's war in a savage place kind of image. How do the people recover? Or is it Dante's circle of hell?
Palestinians won't recover. Look, I'm a war reporter, and my trademark is I live with the people I write about, which means I probably spent one night in a hotel in the last 10 years, and I live with the poorest of the poor, which means you can't imagine what a war is when you are not anymore with your fixer, your translator, your security guy, and you are just with civilians. And I studied international law. I actually wanted to work in international criminal court. Well, there is no such thing as civilians and combatants in a war. There is not even a front line. There is just a front area, and everything is a target. Everything is a target. And the first thing that you learn in war, wherever there is a place like a hospital, a bread line, wherever there is a gathering of civilians, that's the danger. There is an airstrike, there is an ambulance going there. That's the danger, because someone is going to hit again and to bomb again. This is what I learned in Aleppo. And this is what I've lived in Gaza in 2014, the last war when, where we could enter. And no, you will never recover, and never. And personally, when Nasrallah was killed, all Syria, came back to my mind. And I spent, I think 3 days talking with Syrian refugees everywhere in the world. And we were celebrating the death of Nasrallah. I know I shouldn't say that, but I think, whoever has been under airstrikes, whoever has been stopped by a checkpoint run by Hezbollah in Syria, remember the cruelty, and it's, so you will never recover. No, and Palestinians will never recover. The point is, at some point you find a way, to leave. The point is, how many Palestinians will stay? Because there is usually after 1 year and a half, the key, the difference is in schools. After 1 year and a half, when you see that your children, are still not in school, you leave. This is what we have seen with Syrian refugees, when we had the exodus toward Europe. For several months, they stayed in Turkey, they stayed in Lebanon, they stayed in Jordan. At some point, they just left. So this will happen in Gaza. And at some point, Palestinians will leave. And Gaza doesn't exist anymore because it's not just its buildings, And Gaza is lost, And then if you want, I can say something about, yes, with time, No, with time, nothing. A war is forever.
What do War Lessons from Gaza, Rethinking Education, Peace in Ukraine and Visionary Leadership have in common? They are all themes from recent episodes of this podcast. Check out more episodes on tallbergfoundation.org or on a platform of your choice.
To leave, they have to open the doors, though. Do you think the Israelis would eventually open the doors? Or the Egyptians allow the doors to be open?
You don't need to open the doors. You need to do, for example, what Spain is doing now in the West Bank, silently, suddenly. Has been so easy. It's becoming so easy to get a Schengen visa. You just go to the consulate of Spain in East Jerusalem and you get it suddenly. Now, I'm sure that Spain doesn't want, to help, Israel kicking out Palestinians. Spain supports Palestine, and so probably this is the way Spain wants to support Palestinians. There is a deep economic crisis in the West Bank, but this is what happens, because of course, let's also remember, I'm based in Kabul, and this is a rule, every time there is a crisis or a war like this, you think, that the attention of the media will be, I don't want to say forever, but at least until, the crisis will be. No, suddenly media will leave. It happened with Afghanistan, it happened with Ukraine, until 6th of October, all our headlines were for Ukraine. And then suddenly we forgot even Ukraine, which is somehow our war. And nothing, we forgot it in 24 hours, So at some point, we will forget again also Palestinians, and Palestinians will leave. Of course, we leave, Look, in Lebanon, for example, we keep saying that there are 500,000 refugees. Yes, it's true, registered refugees with UNRWA. A few years ago, I think it was 2018 or 2019, Palestinians held, the first census ever. And, they are 80,000, 80. In Lebanon, refugees, everybody left. Because when Syrians left for Europe, Palestinians, left like many Lebanese, So the point is, we will see many Palestinians will leave Palestine. And again, I would say not just because of Israel, but also because of Hamas and Fatah, because of the Palestinian Authority. And I was reading this morning, the economic analysis for the future, both West Bank and Gaza. The idea is that basically now already Palestine is back to the end of the second intifada, the human development index, So only, to remove the rubble in Gaza, this will take 14 years, 14. If, tomorrow Israel opens, Rafah, and we can take away the rubble. Do you really think, if you were a Palestinian from Gaza, would you stay?
Of course not. Of course not.
I'm not saying that by leaving Palestinians will forget Palestine, because of course, the Palestinian identity is quite different, from most other national identities, And of course, war and conflict strengthens, this kind of identities. We have seen it with the Ukrainians, that became more Ukrainians, when they were basically attacked by Russia. So, of course, leaving doesn't mean, forgetting or, the point is, I'm really at home in Palestine. So, of course, for me, it's quite, when I see international journalists, they get the kind of answers that, there is a first layer of answer, do you want to leave? No, never. Because this is my homeland and blah, 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 blah. And then, when you just, talk with Palestinians, and especially with young Palestinians over a tea, over a coffee, or, just, because I live there, of course, everybody wants to leave, There is a strong social pressure, of course, terrible social pressure. And, but that's the world today, we all want to leave.
But the kids, I assume, are connected through social media to the rest of the world. They don't live completely in isolation. They have some connectivity, don't they? However poor.
Of course, and social media and actually internet was one of the key factors in the Arab Spring. Because now, of course, we all know what the world looks like, basically outside our rooms, and especially in the Middle East, especially, in Gaza, The point is, when it comes specifically to Gaza and the West Bank, to young Palestinians, social media totally replaced media, no one is going to watch, the BBC. There is only one channel, which is Al Jazeera Arabic, not Al Jazeera English, and then social media. And there is, for example, a Telegram channel for the resistance. I mean, it's called Resistance Network or something like that, And usually I follow, including when I am, I don't know, in Jenin, and I follow what happens, in other cities or in Gaza through this channel, and it's weird, because basically, I don't know, there is an attack in Gaza, where you have a tank that, opens fire on, Hamas fighters that, attack a tank, and kill, I don't know, three soldiers, and then you have usually Hamas fighters, record their operations, and I have to say that they remind a lot the ISIS fighters, because it's also the same style, honestly, the video style. Anyway, so immediately, you have on Al Jazeera and you have on Telegram, on Instagram, on Facebook, these videos coming from Gaza. And you see the same video for 1 week, 10 days, including on Al Jazeera. And it's always the same video. But the idea that you get is that, there are so many Hamas fighters, firing at so many tanks and so many Israeli soldiers killed. So really, the social media, when you are, change, and somehow, the reshape, the reality. And I remember, the first major raid in Jenin, which was really, the beginning of this third intifada. It was the end of 2022. It lasted 6 hours. At the time, it was really unthinkable, 6 hours. And I was in a refugee camp. It was during the night. And so for 6 hours, basically, I don't know, it was, we were just staying indoors, of course, and from the sound, the gunfire, it looked like a battle, and from what I was reading and, on Telegram, it looked like, I don't know, really, a battle. And then in the end was nothing. It was nothing. It was just gunfire. When everything was over, there were just 2 Palestinians killed. And I was really thinking, from Telegram, okay, we will find 70 dead. And this is something that, anytime you happen to be in a refugee camp during a ride, and from the refugee camp, you follow the ride on Instagram, there is, a ride in front of you, and there is a ride in social media, And in the ride in front of you, Palestinians will be furious for what I'm going to say, but in the ride in front of you, the IDF is always winning. And in the ride on Instagram, Hamas is always winning, Okay, now the point is, the truth is, that, yes, that IDF crashed the resistance in the West Bank, whatever you can read, in social media. The point is, Palestinians get their information through social media. So no matter what we say on the BBC, and what they see is a different reality.
The point is that truth has become a relative concept.
Yeah.
Our understanding of truth is filtered by media. It's filtered by what we see outside our windows. It's filtered by the internet. And we all believe those truths. And that is a root cause of a lot of the tension in our societies.
And for me, actually, as a journalist, who has always been living with, I live with those I write about. The point is true, that now with the internet, we are basically surrounded by information, even too much, but my feeling is also that, we don't see what is happening. If you think of Israelis, Israelis don't get any image from what's happening in Gaza, except for the images of their own soldiers taking selfies, as they burn everything. The same is true for Palestinians. Palestinians basically never got the image of October 7th. Never. And we didn't get, in Europe and the United States, we didn't get those images because, the Netanyahu, the Israeli government decided not to show to the general public all the image that was showing first to Israeli journalists and then to international journalists. I think this was a mistake. As a journalist from Yediot Ahronot, I could see all the images since the beginning, and that's why it was so complicated for me to explain to other Western journalists what really happened. And then I realized that simply the difference was that I saw more images than the others. Still today, You have yet to see, the old images of October 7th. This was a choice, out of respect for the victims, even if, somehow damaged Israel. But anyway, whatever the number of images, Palestinians didn't see anything. I remember when I went to Kfar Aza, one of the kibbutzim, of October 7th, where actually my photographer, the photographer of Yediot Ahronot, was killed. And I had a Palestinian driver from Jerusalem, and was quite tough, He was, of course, treated in an extremely rude way, but by all the Israelis that, we came across. At the same time, I have to say, when we arrived in Kfar Aza, we parked the car and he didn't get off. East Jerusalem, very, very moderate. He hates Hamas. And he said, I don't care. He didn't get off. He didn't want to see Kfar Aza, which I can tell you, I'm a war reporter, not all scene of war is the same, Kfar Aza, as Be'eri, as, Nir Oz, was not the scene of a battle, of a, a clash. No, was more like, butchery. Was the scene of a serial killer was here. Was not like the ruins of Mosul or the ruins of Raqqa or the ruins of, whatever, Donetsk. No, was totally different, And the driver said, I don't care.
Francesca, let's leave it there because I think that summarizes precisely the problem. Thank you very much for this conversation. And I only have one addendum. Please stay safe.
No, I'm, safer in Jenin than in Europe, I'm
not going to tell my European friends that, but I think you're right.
No, when I was in Aleppo, it was my first war, especially as a journalist, and of course that the first war marks you forever. And the point is, nobody in 3 years and a half, nobody ever asked me, "Oh, how are you doing?" No. Now I got used to it. So after 10 years, I got used not to being asked, how are you doing? But in this case, in the case of Gaza, and I think, look, I don't care because I'm the one who should ask, hey, how are you doing? There's this war, October 7th and October 8th and also October 6th, honestly, in front of you. And you didn't do anything, So, guys, you have a problem, I think it's definitely I'm safer in Israel and Palestine. Absolutely.
Thank you very much.
Ciao.
Thank you for listening to this episode of New Thinking for a New World. I'm Alan Stoga, podcast host, and I look forward to your joining our next conversation. Remember, tell us what you think at tallbergfoundation.org.